1, 2, 3, mark. Greetings and salutations, friends, or enemies, perhaps, as I have done this for you. It has been tomorrow for a very long time, and I and Kyle are finished with the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Rings of Power. Not a single episode drop, not a double, 3 hours.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and it's a mess of a thing after 3 hours of enduring that. That was a serious endurance challenge there.
And I just want to point out as well here as well, right? The extended edition of Lord of the Rings is 9 hours. The whole thing, right?
Yep.
We sat through a third of that, and nothing really happened. Very, very frighteningly little happened.
Unironically, yes, for 3 hours. If you remember where we last left off on the last season, where, everything's sort of gone to shit, basically. And, Sauron's doing his evil things, everything's been revealed, and, all the pieces seem like they're moving, all going to be really quickly. Well, don't worry. These first 3 episodes are going to move incredibly slowly, to the point where it sort of just reminds you, like, oh, stuff is happening, and then it just ends in each episode. But it manages to drag its heels in a way that Arch and I just really can't quite wrap our heads around. Like, they really just don't do anything, despite spending 3 hours trying to do something.
I mean, they kind of begin by resetting the story. So we start out with Sauron speaking to the orcs, and Sauron is basically, okay, Morgoth has been defeated, you're orcs, nobody likes you, your only option here is genocide, but I'm willing to lead you. Okay. Well, there you go, I guess. He's not wrong. The elves aren't going to be like, oh, Orky Borky's, oh, friend. No. In fact, the moment the elves realize what Mordor has become, they're like, right, generals, how can we carry out an extermination campaign against the orcs? There's no coexisting here. Sauron is right when he says that it's, them or nothing here. And they're like, oh, Sauron, we don't like you. We don't want to be slaves to darkness no more.
Yeah, unironically, they literally rebel against Sauron, like basically trying to usurp and kill him, with Advar taking control of the orcs, the father of the orcs as he's dubbed himself, and they start stabbing the ever-living crap out of Sauron, which, when Arch and I are watching this, it just looks like he's incompetent. This whole scene, he's just weakly cast aside and being stabbed and like, what's happening? Overrun by a couple of orcs.
They easily kill Sauron. Then Sauron respawns after eating a rat. It's like, yep. Okay, great. That's the Dark Lord I wanted to see.
Turned into goo. The rat got too close to the liquid goo, and then he ate the rat and consumed its biomass. They literally stole that out of Prototype, by the way, but whatever.
Then Sauron goes on a journey where he meets an old man who's like, I'm going to tell you some wise and philosophical nonsense, and then I'll promptly die so you can go on your journey properly.
He unironically did.
And that's what happened. And I hate this because the older man is like, oh, you should forgive yourself for the bad things you did. You were just trying to do right? Like, bruh, you have no goddamn clue.
Like, he's lecturing Sauron, and all of his lecturing stuff this old guy does is always like, just because you're evil and did evil things, and it's like he's talking to Sauron without knowing he's talking to Sauron. Like, the writers can't really mask it. And then just to reaffirm that he's evil, by the way, like when the log of the ship, when it comes under attack, because it's all a flashback to when he was lost at sea, and when Galadriel met him, had to swim to his raft. Like a log falls on him, he's like, help me, and then he grabs his little necklace thing, he's like, lol, no, and then he, explodes because the boat explodes. Everyone dies, except for him.
No explanation for why he's out to sea either, but that's how he met Galadriel. There was no great scheme here, it was just by sheer retarded accident.
Ironically.
As for Galadriel, okay, so they forged the 3 elven rings. And then apparently everyone started disagreeing as Elrond nabs the rings, runs away with them to tell Gil-galad, Gil-galad, look, these bad people forged these weird-ass rings or something. And Gil-galad's like, lol, bro, that sounds great, let's use them now. I was like, what?
Well,
But they're evil.
What's funny is that when he handed him the rings, he's like, I'll take him out to the deepest part of the water and I'll cast them into the sea. And even Manwë can find them. And then he goes out there and like his boat is randomly rocked for no reason. And he's like, but what if I peek at the rings? And these rings, by the way, these rings of power, have the literal same power as the one, like, true ring, as the Lord of the Ring, right? And it starts whispering, like, Baja, put me on. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll just put you on because you're telling me to. Instead of throwing him overboard.
This is one of the biggest problems with this entire thing. The show wants Sauron to be infinitely competent and infinitely incompetent at the same time. You're supposed to believe that Elrond is totally on point when he's like, we have no idea what Sauron's planning. It could be a grand, complicated scheme that we simply can't fathom. Meanwhile, Sauron is on the other end of the earth getting his ass kicked in by orcs.
Yep.
Like, oh,
Literally,
yes.
he has to bend the knee to Advar and, like, kiss the dirt in front of Advar and basically pledge fealty to Advar. That is how low Sauron is in this show.
Sauron has no plan here. He has no plan. He's just following the script. I mean, hell, he leaves Celebrimbor after being discovered by Galadriel. Galadriel doesn't tell Celebrimbor that Halbrand is Sauron. She elects not to, for reasons unbeknownst. Then she chases after Elrond to argue about the rings, because suddenly Elrond's like, I don't like these rings anymore all of a sudden, actually. I think they might be a part of Sauron's ploy or something. For reasons unbeknownst to anyone, so that Halbrand can return to Celebrimbor. At which point, like, okay, why did you leave? He doesn't even disguise himself, he just returned as Halbrand. He could simply have just stayed there and been like, so, more rings?
Yeah, that is essential. Oh, it's so annoying because Celebrimbor's like, was told by Galadriel, no matter what, don't trust him. And he's like, okay, won't trust him. He comes back and he's like, Galadriel said not to trust him. Then it gets rainy and cold out. He's like, but poor Halbrand is cold in the rain and the wind. I'll let him in. I'm just gonna let him in. Even though Galadriel, warned me against this and I trust her, I'm just gonna let this guy Halbrand back in. No problems. Don't worry about it.
There's no subterfuge here. Like, okay, they made an enormous mistake in making Sauron a character. Because the moment you make him a character, you need to give him flaws, you need to try and humanize him. That's what they're doing with all of the evil characters here. Same with the orcs. There are orc babies now. Because the show wants you to feel bad for the orcs. Like, we don't want to go to war, Mr. Adar. Oh, do we really have to go to war?
They
yes.
have a scene, and Arch isn't actually kidding at all, by the way. Like, there's an orc where is lieutenant of Advar, and he's like, well, what about, can we just have peace? And then as he's like, no, you can't have peace, they'll just murder us. And as he walks away, there's an orc nursing a orc baby. And they're both abominations, right? And he's like, comes in all fatherly and lovingly, and like, oh. And it's like, what the fuck?
They're just people now. See, what Tolkien did so excellently is he crafted a world that had enough suggestion in it without any clear answers. Like, the rings are the perfect example of this. The rings are powerful, okay? What do the rings do? Not powerful. Okay, that's all I get? Yeah, well, this one controls fire, kinda. And that's enough. All I need to know is that the rings are incredibly powerful. I don't need to know the logistics behind this. Same with Sauron. I don't need to know why he's so evil. All I need to know is that he is that evil. He is the master manipulator. And the moment you put a human face on him, now he's flawed. Now he's a flop and a failure, and people are attributing ridiculous schemes to him that he himself has no goddamn clue he's doing. I mean, he's forging these rings for the dwarves. I was like, okay, when did you even come up with this? Like, what are you doing, Sauron? It's like, well, I know that Durin has been, like, disowned by his dad. How do you know that? Said so in the script, right there.
Said so right there. I know about this, but how did you come across this information, Sauron? And he just doesn't. And also, when it comes to all of his little ploys and plots, he just fails upwards, like, unironically. Like, the literal definition of failing upwards is now Sauron. Like, when it came to sitting outside, when it came to coming inside the room, then he pretends to be a literal Valar to Celebrimbor when he takes on the form of Vanatar. It's like, oh my god. Like, it's like, where did Halbrand go? Celebrimbor just completely forgot that Halbrand was in his room, and then the guy appears from his fireplace that looks like kind of like Halbrand, but with blonde hair and elven ears, and claiming to be a Valar. Like, come on, dude. It's just too fucking ham-fisted. It's too ham-fisted.
None of the guards, not Celebrimbor's servant, not anything. And I also want to say, Halbrand sneaks back into Mordor and faces off against Anatar, or Adar, or whatever his name is.
Adar, yep.
He's surrounded by orcs. This is Sauron. He's not some dude. He is a Maiar. He is a god, in essence. Like, he can talk to a dog, and the dog is like, holy shit, you're scary. I'll do whatever you say. But the orcs and Adar himself cannot recognize motherfucking Sauron in their midst.
Right in front of him. Literally talks directly to him. Has him kneeling and kissing the dirt at his feet. Adar does at one point. Sauron is literally at his feet. Could literally just put him down again. And doesn't. And doesn't even recognize that it's Sauron. Despite all the evidence and clues.
And it makes it all less interesting, because he's not some master manipulator. We aren't allowed to fill in the plot holes by ourselves by attributing powers to Sauron. He should have been some distant dark entity whose plans are virtually unknowable. In essence, you should arrive at the conclusion of Season 2 when they're forging the rings, which they don't. They forge the rings in, like, Episode 3 out of this. And you should genuinely be looking back at how the hell did we arrive at this point. Instead, Sauron shows up, cosplays as an elf, makes a flashy fire show and goes like, I want to make more rings. Your High King is against this, and, you know, nobody think this is a good idea. And Galadriel? Oh, don't mention her, it's fine. But make more rings, though.
Yeah, like, there's no reason to trust him. They do go out of the way to try to say, like, he's a master manipulator, and then Galadriel's like, he wormed his way into my heart, you know, I couldn't control myself, and it's like, he doesn't really, like, you guys are just dumb.
His entire manipulation is like reverse psychology. It's like when Celebrimbor comes out to see him, he's like, well, I guess I'll just leave then, I know where I'm not wanted. And Celebrimbor's like, no, it's fine. And he does this again, like, oh, I really shouldn't tell you this, but, you know, Gil-galad thinks you're a little weirdo in your tower and stuff, you know. Like, God, this is not particularly manipulative in the slightest.
It's toddler manipulation what it is.
Yeah, because again, Sauron needs to be both infallible and fallible at the same time, which just makes him a terrible character. And there is no good reason for why any of this is happening. None of this. And also, the dwarves, right? Because the dwarves want the rings because suddenly their connection to the mountain is weakened. Why? Is it because of the Balrog? That one piece of, like, because they knocked a hole in the wall in Season 1, and the Balrog, like 50 million feet below, was like, huh?
Well, rock over and fall down on my head. Yes.
Is that it? And if that's it, how the hell does Sauron know? Does he have a hotline to the Balrog? Like, hey, could you shake the mountain a bit? Yeah, boss.
Shake it up a little bit, so that way when they sing and do love how they sing, the dwarves do, to check the stability of the mountain, right? And when the lady sings, like it causes like half their little kingdom to collapse, and like, that's not good. And all their master plan's like, dig more carefully.
Yes.
They literally say that. Dig a bit more careful. I was like, okay.
The stone witches are like, I don't know what to tell you, King. We used to be able to talk to the rock, but now it just keeps falling down on us. And he turns to his master digger and goes like, dig carefully. Thank you, King. I hadn't considered it. I was going to deploy blasting charges.
It's like no matter what, right? Because when you're making like a prequel trilogy, like they did with the Star Wars series, you try to foreshadow the fall of Anakin to become Darth Vader, right? In the same way that this prequel needs to foreshadow Sauron's manipulation and all the things he's going to become to set up the events of what will be the last alliance of men and elves, and that whole thing where the ring is gotten by Isildur. The big problem here is that the story just really doesn't know how to execute this competently. If it was in the hands of more competent writers who could, do some nuanced storytelling, perhaps, but like what Arch has said the entire time is, it's just so blunt with like the manipulation. It's like, we gotta show you Sauron doing the manipulation, we gotta show you Sauron kneeling, we gotta show you Sauron getting defeated, and so all that you're left thinking is that Sauron's just kind of incompetent, and he's not really spooky or intimidating. At the beginning, Arch and I were talking about how in the beginning of the Lord of the Rings movies, you see Sauron in the final battle at Mordor against Isildur and his father, and you see him get defeated, but as he's fighting dudes, for the few seconds he's on camera, he is swinging his mace, and dozens of elven men are going flying into the air, killed instantly on impact. Right? And that he's intimidating. He's actually scary. Here, they have successfully undermined Sauron to the point where he is not that intimidating to what he was, and he's just incompetent now.
It also means that all of his achievements feel contrived.
Yes.
As well. Like the rings. So the elves, they know Halbrand was involved in figuring out the process, but they know he didn't actually touch the rings. They know they forged these rings entirely by themselves. Yet Elrond is like, this could still be a part of his master plan. And he's the only one. All of the other elves, even knowing that Sauron was involved in figuring out the process, are fully on board with the rings, not hesitating for a moment. And this seems to be attributed to the rings being seductive, but I want to point out, the other rings aren't like that. The reason why the One Ring is like that, being able to whisper and have a will of its own, is because Sauron literally poured a portion of his soul into that ring. The other rings are merely powerful magical artifacts. They can't, open up the bag and be like, hi, I'm really pretty. Put me on your finger.
Put me in figure. Because that's how they treat it when the elves get the rings. They're all just putting them on, they can't stop themselves. And then they put it on, and then the next one puts it on as quickly as possible, as if completely oblivious, and they're not even worried, right? And the other problem is the setup, right? We have to go back to season 1. The setup is that the elves are waning, and the reason why they're waning is because they need mithril to sustain themselves, but the dwarves won't give it to them. For some reason, they've made mithril tied to the fact that that's why elves are staying in Middle-earth, and it's not for any other reason. Mithril is the reason of what makes elves stay, otherwise they will fade. It's just completely dumb. That whole revision and over-explaining how things work, and like Arch said earlier, showing us literally how the rings are made, all it has done, it successfully demystified the setting completely. If you were to take this as canon, which I wouldn't, if you were, sane.
And there also comes the thing, okay, so the rings fix everything, by the way. Galadriel, Gil-galad, and a boat builder dude, whose name I forget, put the rings on their fingers, and suddenly everything's fine. The tree is fine, the lighting shifts to be warmer,
Yes.
What? Okay, so it didn't have. They didn't need mithril after all. They just needed an injection of mana, I guess.
Well, the rings are made with mithril. They do establish that now.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a tiny amount. Like, they were asking for, like, massive amounts, enough to, like, they wanted to feed, what was it, they offered, like, 500 years of wooden food or something in return for mithril?
Yep, and then the Dwarves like, nope, not gonna give you all mithril, it's a shiny rock, and we don't want to share it. And they had to smuggle that mithril even to get that, so they could build those 3 rings, right?
Yeah, it seems just silly. And again, it's a contrivance. Suddenly, everything is fine. The tree is in full bloom again. Like, okay. Very well. So these 3 rings have the power to fully revitalize the elves. Right. But remember when, later down the story, when the 1 ring is built and the elves immediately need to take off the rings and hide them, etc.? Why didn't they start fading again?
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not tied to the stupid rings, it's not tied to mithril. Like, this whole revision thing has just opened a massive plot hole in everything else. Oh, them trying to add on to Tolkien's setting, like adding orc families now, and adding all sorts of other things, has unironically caused the setting to completely collapse as like a platform with which to tell a story.
Yes, because now it's no longer a good versus evil story. Now it's a one group of Californians versus another group of Californians. And we don't even get, like, moral justifications anymore. Like, okay, why do the elves hate the orcs? Well, no reason now, because the elves are like, well, the orcs are evil under the command of, like, Sauron or something, right? But they aren't, because now they're just, people with families, so they're not evil anymore. We've eradicated the concept of evil from this universe. Yep. Like, even Sauron's doing the stuff he's doing for... Why? What reason? Why is he carrying out this plan? Just to regain control of the orcs? Like, even his motivations are unclear because he doesn't mention anything. There's nothing built up there. There's only the old guy who's like, well, you can choose to be good, I guess. And Sauron's like, yeah, I can do that.
But I'm not gonna. I'm gonna take your necklace and let you die.
They both want to have the world be evil. Like, Sauron's just evil and he's just manipulative. And they also want to have the orcs be just weirdly neutral. Like, again and again, they want to have their cake and eat it too. And again and again, they look down upon their plates with no more cake on it, wondering, where did it go?
They really do. And it's not helped at all, by the way, by how many other story arcs, right? Because we still have the Istar,
Gandalf is off in the desert, off to find Tom Bombadil.
Yep, because he's going to find Tom Bombadil from the looks of it. Then we still have, Isildur's plot. Then we have not only Isildur's plot, but then we have the Queen of Numenor's, and it's just a massive mess of a story.
The Queen, honestly, is a perfect example of, like, the writing at play, because she's supposed to be blind, yet she constantly forgets that fact while she's on screen. Like, a character will reach out a hand to her without saying anything, and she'll grab their hand. How did you know that, Queenie? Well, it said so in the script.
She'll even stop and turn, by the way, like on a dime, to make sure she doesn't bump into somebody.
Then, on another occasion, she's going to, like, hesitantly reach out for something, like, she can't see. Like, lady, you're doing a very poor job of this whole blind thing.
Oh, the show cannot make up its mind with whether she's blind or not. And the whole, like, them stealing the Palantir to then, be like, oh, she's using elven artifacts. Oh, the queen cannot be trusted. And then an eagle shows up at the right opportunity for Fezron, I can't remember his name, to basically be like, oh, see, the eagle has chosen me. Like, it feels like contrivance after contrivance after contrivance of just very coincidental failing upward sort of events happening. where it's like,
Yes.
Quinky Dink, another Quinky Dink. Like, it's just over and over, and not just with Sauron's storyline, with his Isildur storyline, with him bumping into the elf again, with him bumping into that girl and with the knife and her stabbing him, and with Sauron fucking falling, you know, at the knees of Adar, and then being let loose because he's like, I know who Sauron really is, and you can trust me. It's just like, everything is so contrived, and it's just, everything seems to happen like it's written on a script rather than naturally happening, or like there's anyone planning anything.
The plot is not brought forward by any apparent master plan or mysterious actions, because they have defined all of the actors. We know what Sauron is doing, we know what Sauron is planning, and he's not planning any of this shit. It seems that all of the plot lines are slotting into place through destiny rather than actions. That's the difference between a good prequel and a bad one. In a good one, you know what's going to happen, yet you keep hoping. Like, oh, maybe they could avoid it, maybe there's some way to avoid it, as you see the pieces slot into place through the characters' actions and their agency. But in a bad one, shit just kind of happens. And this is most assuredly a bad one.
It's so contrived. It's painful.
But hey, at least that's 3 hours down. Only another, 5 to go.